Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about part 2 of my 3-day prayer and fasting. I did part 1 of my testimony and you have to go and watch that one to have a better understanding of what I'm talking about. And some of you have requested that I do part 2 of my testimony because God does not leave things in the middle. So it has taken a long time to do this video, but here I am with part 2 today. Be sure to watch this testimony to the end because I'm going to tell you a story that will encourage you to continue holding on to Jesus, knowing that whatever you are going through now is just temporary. It's just for a season, and God will beautify your life in due season. I'll give you a short story of my background so that you don't get confused in case you didn't watch the first part. So my mother died when I was very young, around 5, 6. She left the 3 of us, and my grandmother took me and looked after me. I lived in the village with my grandmother, very loving woman, very caring. She taught me how to pray. She took me to Sunday school every single Sunday. I knew how to recite Bible verses, and I was so good at it, and she was so proud of me. Every night, she made sure that before going to bed, we prayed. We took turns, and I was very small. I remember I was very young. Every time she would say, "It's your turn," I was sweating. I didn't even know what to say. And she kept on pushing me to pray. There was never a night that we didn't pray. No matter how tired she was, sometimes I remember I was even laughing at her. She would be praying while dozing and she would forget what she was saying. But we prayed every night. And God remembered those prayers. Then, throughout the years, primary school, I finished there and I went to boarding school and I went to town. God ordered my steps. God's favor was upon my life. Now you have to go and watch part 1 because that's where now I talk about the 3 days of prayer and fasting and how God helped me in that house because I lived in so many houses and some of them didn't want me. And in this particular house, God performed a miracle and removed me from that house. In part 1 of my testimony, 2 days after I fasted, God answered my prayer, and within 1 week, everything was sorted and I was out of that house. But before then, in those 3 days that I prayed and fasted, God gave me a word. This word is what carried me in South Africa. This is now part 2 of this prayer and fasting. God will go ahead of you and give you a word. Before your miracle, during prayer and fasting, your ears are very attentive to God's voice. So make sure that if you are praying and fasting, ask the Holy Spirit to open the eyes of your understanding so that you understand and you hear God clearly. He will give you that one word. That one word is your miracle. The scripture that will give you during prayer and fasting, it's going to be the answer to everything that you are looking for. So when I was praying and fasting in those 3 days, God gave me Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 to 3. And within 1 week, everything was ready and I traveled to South Africa. I went to live with my cousin, very wonderful woman. I was so comfortable in that house. She helped me. She was just there to make sure that everything was fine for me. I lived in that house comfortably. I lived with my cousin for about 8 months and I was so comfortable, and that became a problem because comfort is an enemy of progress. I had everything and I felt so good for the first time, but I started to feel uncomfortable because I was living with my cousin who is just 1 year older than me. And she had her house, she was married, they were expecting their first child. And here I am in her house being kept. Despite the good life I had, I was feeling very unsatisfied because I wanted God to do something very quick and just move out of the house and go and live by myself. But I didn't have a job. I had to wait on God. His right time to move me to the next level. In life, there are seasons, and those seasons must be respected. You cannot jump to another level before your time. So I had to be in that house. Then I started to look for a job, and my cousin helped me get a job at church as a receptionist. But I knew nothing because I had no background in computers where I could even type. I didn't know how to type. I didn't know how to communicate well on the phone. So it was a challenge. And then 2 months later, I lost that job. Then a friend from church helped me get a job at a restaurant. So I had a salary and I was doing waitressing, so I could get some tips from customers and at the same time a small salary. So that helped me to move out from my cousin's house, and I was sharing a room with my friends. Now real life started. Has God done an amazing thing in your life? Don't sit on your testimony. The reason God has given you that testimony is because He wants you to help lives, and He wants you to share it with others so that they know that there's a God that still answers prayers. What is your story? What has God done for you? Share it on this channel. So when you are praying and fasting, God will give you a promise in His word, and that promise will take time. Remember Abraham? It took time. We went through stage after stage. He went in different places. He camped in different places. And God, in those different places, He showed up. He learned how to trust God fully. So he went from place to place, but God was with him. Anytime that you pray and fast, be attentive. God will give you a word, but that word won't be fulfilled in one day. Don't give up, because God will never lie when He gives you a promise. Be patient. So despite God answering my prayer, taking me to South Africa, things didn't work out in one day. It took time. And there were times that I wanted to give up. I wondered whether God was with me, because life became a nightmare and I was in a foreign land, and I didn't know what to do. The only thing that came to my mind was to pack my bags and go back to my country. But God showed up every step of the way. The work I had in the restaurant was so tough. I was working night shifts. Sometimes I couldn't even sleep. We had to work double shifts, and imagine staying the whole night and just sleeping for a few hours and going back. I had my feet swollen all the time, and my health was not very good. But I had to start somewhere. Working in a restaurant took the place of God, because I was not able to go to church. I was working on Sunday. I was off during the week. There were people who had their off days on Sundays, and whenever I could ask to be off on Sunday, my manager refused. I lost the relationship with God. Remember this God who did wonders for me, and I could not even go to worship Him. After working there for about a year and a half and not going to church, I couldn't pray anymore like I used to, and something strange happened. God had to send an angel. And one day I was working, this man came, sat outside. I went to serve him his coffee, and he was looking at me in a very strange way. I thought it was those weird men. But no, this man was looking at me. He wasn't saying anything, and he wasn't talking. He was just busy looking down, reading his newspaper. He didn't speak to anybody. And that was so strange. And people were like, is he fine? Go and check if he's fine. I went there, is everything fine? He just nodded his head. And he finished his coffee. He left the money on the table and he went. When I went there, he left a note for me. And I took that note, I read it, and it said, Agnes, because he saw my name on the badge, and he remembered my name. And he said, Agnes, God and the devil are fighting over your life. What? God and the devil are fighting over my life? It means God has won. When I got this note, I was so shocked. I went looking for this man. I didn't find him. I went round. I went behind the building. I went in the parking lot. He was nowhere to be found. He disappeared. He was gone. He left the note and he was gone. That's how God came through for me. The message that came for me was in a shocking way so that I act fast. God sent an angel my way. And I believe that he was reminding me that you are not in the right path. Agnes, go back. Go back on track because I have great and mighty things that I want to do for you. And I went home, and what I did was go on my knees and I said, God, what are you saying? Because you are saying something. And a thought came into my mind and said, God and the devil are fighting over my life. I haven't been going to church. I've lost the relationship with God. And here I am working. It was a way for God to remind me, you've lost your path. Come back. Because I'm the God that can do anything here in this country. I can give you any job. And I got the courage to quit that job. But it took me some months because I wanted to save the money so that I could have money for rent and some money for food while looking for another job. And I quit that restaurant job. Everyone was so sad. But anyway, I had to do it. I started to look for a job could let me go to church on Sunday. And during that time, I exhausted all my savings. I couldn't find another job. Problems are not their killers. Problems like that can come because you need courage and strength for the next level. So I didn't have money for rent, I didn't have money for food, and I didn't have a job. I didn't want to go to my cousin because I didn't want her to look at me like, hey, you moved out of my house and here you are, you failed to look after yourself. So I just had that pride and said, I'm not going to tell them anything. And I was busy negotiating with my landlord to help me to just wait a little bit until I get a job. And the landlord was so kind that I couldn't pay rent all that time. But I didn't have food. I starved for 3 full weeks. I didn't have enough food. I was just now going to church, and at the end of the service every Sunday evening, we could go and have some cookies and have our coffee. That most of the time was my dinner, and sometimes the neighbor would give me something to eat, and life went on like that. And I remember going on my knees and I said, God, you brought me here. And remember your promise to fulfill it. Because if you don't do that, I'll find myself back to Zambia. I don't know what to do right now. How am I going to pay rent and everything else? And God gave me another word in 2 Kings chapter 4 about the widow woman, how the prophet helped this widow woman. And God was saying that you will not lack. I'm going to provide for you miraculously. That very week, I got a job. I was called and I was told to start the following month. Remember what I've said before, that before a miracle, God will give you a word. God sends a word so that you prepare yourself. You believe that word and you stand upon it. And your faith is going to move mountains. And that's what God says in Psalms chapter 107 and verse 20. He sent forth his word and healed them. So your healing may mean provision, finding a job, getting a new place, having your children in good health and obedient, whatever you are looking for. He will send forth his word in your situation, and that word is going to heal you, is going to provide for you, and is going to do anything that you are looking for. This new job is what brought about a lot of changes in my life. I was working and I met a friend from Zambia, my country of origin, and she was doing the same job that I was doing, but she had worked in that company for a long time, for many years. And she was intending to start her own business. And we started to talk, and I told her I don't have much to invest in this business. And she said, no, don't worry about it. I'll do everything. All I want is that we use your apartment for the business. So I agreed to it. You know, when God is the one doing it, things just fall in place. We started to work on that. I had to quit my job and we started that business because she was very sure that it was going to work for us. So we started working, and our first project we did gave us about $20,000, and that was a lot of money for me for the first time. Through that, I was able to get a bigger apartment, and I got my first car. That was so exciting. I was like, is it really happening to me? It's like God graduated me from walking on foot to driving my own personal car. And I remember how I was walking in the village without shoes. Whether it's raining or it's hot, you don't have shoes and your feet are burning. You don't know better. No matter how long it takes, don't lose heart. Whatever God has promised, He will do it. Hold on to God's promises. And if you go and watch the first part of this testimony, I'll put the link below. You will see how I moved from one place to another, and in that house where I was living, I was clearly begging to stay there. I went through a lot, but I stayed in that house. And God remembered that. And when I was in South Africa, God gave me my own house. That was so amazing. It was like God was saying, I don't want you to beg for a place to stay anymore. I'm giving you your own house with your name on it. And that's what He did. I bought a townhouse in a very nice place, and my life just turned like 360 degrees. You know, from having nothing, from begging for a place, to being able to have my own place and being comfortable in my own home. That can only be God. And one promise that He gave me was fulfilled, because God is not man to lie. So hold on to Jesus. This is a story of a very well-known American storyteller. He told a story like Jesus used to tell parables in the Bible to illustrate a spiritual point. This guy told a story about two pots, and there was this man who had these two pots, and these two pots could speak. Instead of keeping water in his house, this man fetched it from the river every day. He had one pot that was cracked, and anytime he would fetch water, the water was coming out from the pot, while this other one was just fine. So he would walk home, and where he was passing, the other side water was leaking. The other side didn't have water leaking because the pot was fine. And one day, this cracked pot spoke and asked him a question. Don't you think I'm useless? And every time you go home, you find that water is almost finished from me, the cracked pot. Don't you think you should just throw me away because I'm useless? And this man turned to the pot and said, you don't understand. As you spill, you water the flowers by the side of the road. And for sure, by the side of the road where the cracked pot was carried, beautiful flowers grew. And he said, you see, these beautiful flowers, they are from your side. I think I'm going to keep you. God today is saying He's going to keep you, even if you are cracked, even if you are looking like a nobody, even if your life is a wreck. He is going to keep you. He wants you. He wants to use you. He is giving you a story, and your story is going to change lives. So this is the moral of this story. I thought I should share it with you, and be encouraged, and don't lose heart. Don't look at your cracks and say, I'm nothing, I cannot be used by God. God wants to use you as cracked as you are. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, share, and like. comment, leave your testimonies. If God has done something great in your life, share it here on this channel. Stay blessed.